Housing market crash, why hasn't it happened yet? My name's Simon Zutshi, and one of the most frequent questions I'm asked is, why hasn't the housing market crash happened yet? Simon, you were saying we're going to get a property crash. And I must admit, I believed we were going to see a property market crash at the end of 2020. Let me explain why I thought it was going to happen, and let me explain why the property market hasn't crashed yet, and will the property market crash in 2021? That's what we're going to cover in this video. So my name's Simon Zutshi. I'm the author of Property Magic, the Amazon #1 property bestseller. I'm the founder of the Property Investors Network, which is the largest network of property meetings around the UK, 50 meetings every month. And I've been investing since 1995, teaching people like you since 2003 how to be a more successful investor. Now, what we need to recognize is the property market doesn't always go up. It goes up and it goes down. It's a cyclical market just like any other market. Now, the reason that the long-term trend in the UK is up is because we live on a small island, a very popular place to live, with an increasing population. Due to increasing birth rates and longer life expectancy, the population is increasing. Now, at the same time, we only have a limited amount of accommodation. And the government say we need about 300,000 homes every year. We only make about 200,000 new homes. So there is a shortage. So over the long time, property prices go up, but they don't always go up. What typically happens is the market is sometimes stimulated, there's a bit of a boom, and prices go up really, really quickly. They go up too much, and then there's a correction where they come down again. So let's look back at some of the other property market crashes we've had. So the big last one was in 2008, 2009, and that was caused by the global financial crisis. What happened in 1998, they introduced buy-to-let mortgages. What that meant was you could have additional property as well as your own home, and you'd rent that property out. So buy-to-let became very popular. There were also lots of TV programs about owning and doing up and renovating property and renting it out in the early 2000s. So we saw the demand for rental properties, to own rental properties, go up dramatically. Add to this, in the early 2000s, there was what was called self-certification, which meant you could just sign a piece of paper to say, well, I can afford this mortgage. And very often banks didn't check. So there was some irresponsible lending and there was some irresponsible borrowing as well. All of this fueled the market in the early 2000s, and it was absolutely booming to a peak in 2007. Now, at that time, banks in America in July 2007 started to realize that they had a lot of toxic debt. What that meant was, for years and years, they've been giving mortgages to people who couldn't really afford to ever pay those mortgages. And those mortgages have been bundled up with other mortgages and sold on. And they realized some of this debt that had been bought would never be paid back. And that's what started the global financial crisis. Here in England, in November 2007, the first casualty here was Northern Rock, when we saw, you might remember the images of the queues all around Northern Rock. People were queuing to take their money out because they heard the bank was in difficulty. In fact, the government had to come in and bail out Lloyds Bank and Royal Bank of Scotland and a number of the big banks. They wouldn't have survived if the government hadn't come in and helped those, because the government cannot afford to banks to fall over. That led to a massive economic crisis. We saw property prices drop. And because they'd been booming in 2007, there were some people who bought property right at the peak and then prices came down. And actually, we saw people who they had a property which they were hoping the value would go up, but suddenly it came down and it wasn't actually making money. And they thought, I've got to get rid of this thing. They sold the property, and that's a bad time to sell when prices have come down. Here's a little secret I want to share with you. People think if prices go up and then come down, oh, I've lost money. Well, you haven't lost money unless you actually sell that property. You still hold on to it, and as long as you can rent it out, and you know it's going to make positive cash flow. What that means is the rent that comes in is more than enough to cover the mortgage, the insurance, the maintenance, the management fees, anything else you've got to pay. So every single month you must make profit. It's one of the golden rules I talk about in Property Magic, and it's one of the videos I've done on this YouTube channel. You must make sure you make positive cash flow and buy in an area with strong rental demand. if you're then holding for long term, which is golden rule number 4, it doesn't matter what happens short term in property prices. So that happened then, the market came down, it took a couple of years, eventually it recovered, and since about 2010, the property market has been going up. And for the last 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, we've seen a property boom. What always happens after a boom is a bust. Now, I expected property prices were going to crash at the end of 2020. Why? Well, beginning of 2020, March, COVID hit the UK and we went into our first lockdown. You must remember it. It was a massive time of uncertainty. Many people were put onto furlough, millions of people, and there was a question whether they'd be taken back into their jobs. Would their job even exist if the business they worked for went out of business? As many shops, restaurants have actually closed down, there are not going to be as many jobs in retail and also in leisure. Now, what the government did was they intervened because the Bank of England had predicted that due to COVID-19 and the pandemic and the recession, because all the shops and restaurants and things were shut, they predicted property prices could fall 16%. And that kind of made sense. So the government stepped in, and what they did was 2 major things. First of all, they extended furlough. Furlough was going to be just for a few months initially till about July. They extended it out till October. And I felt, well, that's a good idea. That's going to prop up the economy. And after that, we might see prices come down. They also introduced the stamp duty holiday. For purchases up to £500,000, what they said was there was no stamp duty if you're a first-time buyer. If you're an investor, we still have to pay the extra 3% stamp, but still it is better than it was before. This really stimulated the market. Add to this the fact that the government made bounce-back loans and CBIL loans available. There's lots of money floating around in the market, and so people put that into property. Also, because for the first lockdown, for about 12 weeks, the whole property market shut. You couldn't do anything. There was a lot of activity that was catching up. And normally there's a boom in the spring, boom in the summer. That pent-up demand came through. This is what carried the property market through. Now, I was saying furlough's going to end in October. As the government said, prices are going to come down after that. Then, not surprisingly, the government realised this was going to happen. They extended furlough to March, April 2021. And I thought, okay, well, that's going to be it. We're definitely going to see that happen with the stamp duty ending the end of March, furlough ending in April. By summertime, we're going to see property prices come down. Yet, in the budget announcement that the Chancellor made at the beginning of March 2021, he said, right, we're going to extend furlough again further to September 2021. And we're going to extend the stamp duty holiday. So they said, what we're going to do is for purchases up to 500,000, we're going to give you an extra 3 months to do that. So instead of the end of March, it's the end of June. And for purchases up to 250,000, which by the way is probably good for most first-time buyers around the country. Property prices are probably averaging about 250. So outside of London and the home counties, for most first-time buyers, that's kind of the price at which they'll be buying at. They've extended for a further 3 months after the end of June to the end of September. So these things are going to keep stimulating the market. That's why the property market hasn't crashed. My question is this: if you think the property market has been booming, what happens after a boom? There's always a bust. Now, I don't think we're going to see a drop as bad as we saw in 2009, which was a pretty bad crash. Up to about 20% was the average, up to 35% in some places. I don't think it's going to be that bad. But I think we are going to see a correction, maybe 10, 15%. Now, look, I don't know. No one's got a crystal ball. No one can project. But I think if you imagine all those people who are going to be coming off furlough and maybe they haven't got a job to go back to, they're going to go on the unemployment benefit lines, they can't afford to hold their properties they might want to sell. What about all the commercial property? I'm standing in what was my former office full of people before. We don't use this as an office anymore. I'm just filming here today because we don't need an office. Everyone's from home. Think about all those offices on the market. Think about all those shops that have gone online. They don't need a premises. Think about all the restaurants and bars that have shut. Tragically, you know, life's never going to be quite the same post-COVID, but all these businesses are going to be in a difficult time in 6 to 12 months. Now, that's when people will be well into having to repay these bounce back loans and CBIL loans. So some people just will not be able to do it. So I think we're going to see tougher economic times coming. I might be wrong. I don't know. I actually think between now and then, I think there's actually going to be a boom in the economy. Why? You've got all these people who have been pent up for months and months in lockdown. They've not been going out spending as much money as they would normally spend, but they've got money to spend. As the market opens, I don't know about you, but I'm desperate to go away and go to a restaurant and have a nice meal and spend a bit of time away from home. I think it's going to be a massive boom during the summer. That's going to be great for all these leisure companies who are going to, help support all this bit. They're going to make a lot of money over this time, but it's good because they've been so badly hit over the last year. Many of those unfortunately won't survive. The government's also brought in some grants to help those kind of businesses to get them up and going. So there's going to be a real boom in the summer, but when reality kicks in towards the end of the year, I think we're going to see prices start to come down. That is unless the government extend furlough further and unless stamp duty is also extended. I don't think that's going to be extended further. So I do believe, although it's a year later than I expected, towards the end of 2021, I think we're going to see a property market crash in 2021. That's just my prediction. Who knows what's going to happen? I've changed my view based on the budget announcement that was made by the Chancellor in early March, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you've got any questions or comments, please do put those in the comments section. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, why not subscribe? Hit subscribe, press the bell icon, then you'll get notified whenever we bring these videos out. I've got lots of market updates like this, and also we've got lots of specific strategies. Go to the channel, have a look. There's a huge amount of information there for you. I think almost 200 videos for you to watch and choose from. And I'm sure if you go through those, you're going to learn a huge amount about how to be an even more successful property investor. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. I hope you've enjoyed that video. I've set up the next video I think you should watch, having just seen this one. Click on the link now to watch that video. And also, if you click on the link just below here, you can access our Property Investor Network meetings. Come to your very first meeting as my guest. Normally £20, but click on the link below, come to your first one just to check it out as my guest at no cost.